On a quiet road in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York sits a small parking lot next to an old barn and a small white sign. Most must drive by and hardly give it a second glance. But beyond this little lot, up a steep, treacherous hill, sits a small school taught around a campfire, surrounded by grass, streams, trees, pitted against the forces of nature. This is known as the Walden Project NY, or more commonly just Walden. And this is their story.
We do a whole orientation, but we kind of break it over 3 days. And so I think by the end of the camping trip, they're going to know everything, all the parts of the Walden Project, in a way that if we did that as like a big PowerPoint, I don't think they would absorb all that information. One of the things I love about teaching with Janine is that she often starts the year with a group game, and within about 2 minutes of playing that game, we can kind of see who everybody is. Side by side, up at dawn, I can see your breath. The morning light warms our skin as we bathe in the riverside. The water's cold and it's dangerous, but it brings me.
People that seem to struggle within the borders of what society tells us is right and wrong and what we're supposed to do and not supposed to do. None of that matters outside, and people are more fully themselves and in tune with everything. Rest our bodies for the night and leave before sunrise. I'm sure that the water won't mind if we rest here for the night and leave before sunrise. I'm sure that the current won't mind if we rest our bodies for the night and leave before sunrise.
It was really a little nerve-wracking because it's like all these new people that, I had met Andy briefly once when he gave me a tour of Walden, but I had never met anyone else, and everyone was new to me. At the end of it, everyone sort of came out of it knowing that they were in a safe space and that they were gonna have it it really set the tone for a really great year to come. Side up at dawn, I can see your breath. The morning light warms our love as we bathe in the riverside. The water's cold and it's dangerous, but it brings me to life. So we stand to read tongues of green and white. I'm sure that the water won't mind if we rest here for the night and leave before sunrise. I'm sure that the current won't mind if we rest our bodies for the night and leave before sunrise. I'm sure that the water won't mind if we rest here for the night and leave before sunrise. I think that the fastest way to build a group is to just put everybody together on a camping trip. Public school was really, really stressful for me, more like.
Our public school system is very broken right now.
In other school systems, there's this big emphasis on, just telling you things that you then can just like spit out later without actually absorbing them. With public school kind of made me feel more cautious, and I didn't talk a lot back then either, so.
Schools teach what they assume their workers need to know in the next 20 years. And that is the model that we work off of, which is a tragedy because it stifles creativity and individuality.
And to me, it seemed like staying in a traditional high school was doing damage to me and to my mind and to, you know, my will.
I'm never not moving. I'm always doing something, unless I'm hyper-focused on something. Well, I'm still moving. And they always took it as me intending to cause trouble, because the schools weren't, you know, prepared or taught how to deal with it properly.
Paulo Freire is this, he's the author of this book called the Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I should know that since I wrote my whole thesis on that. What Paulo Freire's big idea was that the traditional education model is what he called the banking model, which is where the students are passive recipients of knowledge. And so he said that the teacher deposits information in the student's head as if making a deposit in a bank, with the expectation that it will be retrieved at a later date, maybe even with interest. So he came up with this idea he called popular education, which is where, also known as liberatory education, like liberate. And the idea is that rather than depositing information in students, you build off the students' experience of the world.
So, what is Walden? Walden is a book written by Henry David Thoreau about his years-long journey, alone, into the woods to contemplate many of life's questions. The book has influenced millions, including several educators, inspired by his words, to start their own alternative education programs.
So, to me, Thoreau and the book Walden that he wrote is kind of iconic of just like leaving society for a while, you know, and people have often talked about leaving society and kind of figuring out what's really important to you. So to sit out in the woods every day with a bunch of people and to contemplate big questions about like, what is my purpose? What are my core values? That will totally change you. So the questions that we repeat to the students over and over again are based on what Henry David Thoreau did, which is, you know, what is my relationship to myself? What is my relationship to my culture? And what is my relationship to the natural world? What
we're able to provide at Walden is vastly different than what just about any other school setting is able to provide in terms of individuality and letting students follow their passions and still have guidelines.
3 days a week, the students arrive in the parking lot around 9:30, and we walk uphill carrying water that we need for the day. Oftentimes there's food or tools.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a struggle, but sometimes it's like it wakes you up and it gets you kind of prepared for the day.
And the first few weeks that I came here was something that was really embarrassing. I was like, oh my God, I have to stop every few steps and I'm so out of breath, and I felt so embarrassed, and it at first made me feel very much very like isolated and like ostracized within myself, right? Where I was like, everybody else can just do this and you can't, right? It's just such a supportive community that in those moments where I felt you know, like my body couldn't hack it, you know, that I was really struggling and it made me embarrassed. You know, I had a community who noticed that I was feeling that way and would support me through it.
We get here, we all hike up the hill. It's like a 1/4 mile or 1/3 mile hike. and we start our chores, which is like splitting wood, preparing food, bringing the books outside.
No. Are we making mashed potatoes? No, we're making roasted potatoes. You just put that in, Iris. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Don't put too much. Save your arms, please, too much.
Okay, I think we have a lot of like leafy things. We need more powdery things.
Okay.
No, like brown.
I know what an party is, but I never watched it.
Keep going. Keep sparking. Keep sparking.
You were in my dream. I knew it. It's literally
Yeah.
Yep.
That doesn't catch the lens. I'm very unhappy.
All right. Hold up. Hold up.
I wasn't. No, I woke up just curious. You know, my.
It's because
Oh, you're mine? It's not raining.
I did not do anything.
I just got spice with something going.
I do the same thing.
All right, let's get started.
That whole process from the time they get to the parking lot to about when we crack open the books, in fair weather it takes about a half an hour, the whole thing, and when it gets colder and more snowy, everything gets more complicated. It might take 45 minutes or an hour. Then we crack open one of our books. It's normally Thoreau. Then we'll have this big philosophical discussion about part is, what is Henry David Thoreau saying? What are we saying? What do we think about all of that?
As for clothing, to come at once to the practical part of the question, perhaps we are led oftener by the love of novelty and a regard for the opinions of men in procuring it than by true utility. I have heard of a dog that barked at every stranger who approached his master's premises with clothes on, but was easily quieted by a naked thief. I don't mind wearing ripped clothing, and I always buy everything at thrift stores for the most part. And I kind of wonder, am I a little bit of a snob about some of that as well? I do like ripped clothing, but it's almost like that's my sense of fashion in a sense. It's like part of my identity. So I just think that's kind of another piece of it. Pass.
What now?
Initial thoughts.
I like I thought it was funny that Thoreau said a dog will bark at a thief in clothes, but not one without, because how do they know? Was some random naked person trying to break into your house, and you're like, why isn't and you woke up and there's just some random naked guy in your kitchen just eating your food, and you're just like, why didn't my dog bark at you? And you're just like, no clothes.
So several times over the next 10 years, I had approached various principals and schools that I was working in and kind of pitched the idea, and a lot of people couldn't quite wrap their heads around what we were trying to do. I heard a lot of comments so it sounds like you're trying to teach living environment in the woods. When do they take their tests? And I was like, okay, this is a totally different education model. This isn't about teaching the old way in a new setting. This is a totally different approach to education.
I'd like to talk about two ideas. First is the concept of the system and what systems thinking implies. A system is a whole that contains two or more parts, each of which can affect the properties or behavior of the whole. For example, you are a system, a biological system called an organism. My roommate in college, and so he and I had a really similar education. I just was asking him, of all the things that we could teach in a school, what do you think would be the most important? And he didn't hesitate, and he said systems thinking. He says, that's the one thing I use every single day. Part of it is being able to map things out on paper, but it actually changes the way that you see the world. We're not allowed to write a single word or number, and I would like for you to explain how to make macaroni and cheese. What is ours?
No letters. No language.
No anything that could possibly be perceived in any way as a word.
Okay. So go ahead, and you're going to communicate how to make macaroni and cheese. Okay, so even if you didn't finish a drawing or anything, just look at them all side by side, see if you can make sense of it, okay?
Any chance for any kind of alternative curriculum setting instruction is always going to help students, to help people grow into who they truly are.
I can rephrase that. This is a famous thought experiment. It's a three-part experiment. Basically what it was saying is, if you are walking by a pond, and as Adeline was saying, you have something really expensive on your feet, like brand new $300 shoes, right? And you see a small child who seems to be struggling and drowning, do you have an obligation to jump in that pond and rescue that child, even though it's going to ruin your shoes? Or is it ethical for you to take off your shoes first and then to help the child at the risk that every second counts in that situation?
Again, the question is, what is your obligation, not what would you choose to do? Does that help any? Does that change anything for you, Noah?
I was looking for specifics. That's what I do. I'm a specific man.
Well,
But nothing is very specific.
Exactly, and that's the problem. I need specifics to make a
Don't.
decision.
You just need to recognize that specifics aren't always the answer.
Specifics are always the answer.
What would society tell you to do? Save the child or don't save the child? If
Well,
society would tell you to save the child.
Nah,
How many
society would
people
be
would
like, nah,
actually
keep your
save the
shoes
child?
big.
Probably not that much, because everybody would be on their phone and like, oh my god, this child is drowning.
After that, we have workshop. At the end of the day, it's always different. There's not really a general term I could use to describe workshop. But yeah, we do stuff with our hands, I guess.
What are we going to be removing in this process of tanning?
On the inside, or what at one point was the inside, all the fat and all the muscle.
Anybody know what this thing's called?
Spigot.
A spile. Good. It's called a spile. And right here, these are old spots where they tapped into the tree. This is too low for us. We don't want to tap a tree here, but I just want to show you when we get out there, the spile sits in here. And then what's the hook for?
Bucket.
For the bucket, great. And we'll go through this more out when we're together, but it's the same system. So this lid is going to come down to protect our sap.
So right now we're working on a project. We've been studying all about our watershed and learning how nature kind of filters water. And so part of what we're working on right now is taking the spot where we do all of our dirty dishes and wash our hands with soap and stuff. And we're creating a little mini wastewater treatment plant.
Here you go. Damien, how do you feel about being a cobble finder
Oh, there's just a couple rocks.
instead of a shoveler? You want to go digging for rocks? Not really digging, but looking.
Go back again. There you go. See how you're getting down to that white? You're getting all that fat and muscle off of there now.
You're just recycling.
This is the important part right here. This black button is going to drive you bananas if somebody hands you the drill incorrectly. So if I hand this drill off to Xavier and I accidentally hit that button, if he goes to use it, the drill is going to go in reverse. It'll still work, but it's going to be annoyingly hard. So yeah, so Xavier just pushed it. Stay and monitor the pickaxe.
A couple stops.
Gavin, do you want to stay so you can take the pickaxe next?
Yes.
Okay.
Damien.
Gooey stuff is some of the glue. White gooey stuff, that pretty much works, doesn't it? Good description. What you're getting off there is that's that glue coming off of the inside. And once you get that all off of there, then that will allow the tanning solution to soak in completely through the hide.
But they have emotions. I don't know if they do. They do. I mean, I said I don't know. They might. They do. I know they do. Okay. Because I can. Oh my God, so many. Okay.
He gets in here.
Oh, does that get like here though?
He knows where he's going, but just make sure he doesn't hit anything. Just be extra eyes for him. This is my nemesis, and I've worked really hard to figure out how to get around this. So these sides are sloping in, which is because our shovels are rounded on the bottom. So to get these sides, what we need to do is put them in backwards, we step on them, and get those edges to start looking straight down. And that way we know that we're down at least 12 inches all the way around the pit.
There are sort of two issues that were related to the cold and the snow. There is the actual cold and the snow, and then there's the fear of the cold and the snow.
And as it gets colder, they shut down because they're not sure that they can survive. They've never had to rely on themselves to gather what they need.
For the most part, when I am warm and layered up, I enjoy myself because I'm with the people who are there to help me out.
One student who was really afraid of the snow and afraid of the cold and all those feelings of like, what did I sign up for? Then I grab, a minus 20 sleeping bag, really warm sleeping bag, fill up a hot water bottle with some just really hot water that we've been boiling over the fire, and just made sure they had plenty of blankets and stuff like that. They're just sitting by the fire, and within 10 minutes they were back to themselves and kind of creeped out of the sleeping bag, and for the rest of the winter they never had to fear again because they knew that if they felt cold they could warm up again. They didn't feel trapped and they didn't feel panicked.
When we get warm, we'll go for a hike on really cold days because it warms us up. And I think, like I said, the discussion is really hard. It's, despite the cold, I think, and the snow, it's still been really fun.
This was the first year Walden had a prom. It was the students' idea, and they did most of the work to make it happen. They also chose the theme, mythical creatures.
Anytime. I'm just refreshing.
Wouldn't that be, what would push someone to fire because such as?
Attempted murder?
Yeah. Do you want to be a witness or not?
I don't think that'd be eating.
Well,
I think aggravated assault.
Let's sit there now. It's over. Like, people are starting to...
I highly recommend coming here if you're looking for something or someone to just sort yourself out. It's a great place to cope. It's a place to get away from everyone and everything.
And I was like, this is my people. This is where I belong. This is where I want to be.
It's just been a really nice program, and for me it was like a place I went when I really didn't quite know what I was going to do with my life. And I still don't, but I think I can accept that more now.
I think just how to communicate with people, it's given me a lot of communication skills, and literally everything else, like what we do in workshops and what I'm definitely taking away a lot more than I did when I was in public school.
We're not just like a campsite out in the forest. We're not like a school where you have to do everything in a very specific way. We are a community. We work with each other. We comfort each other when times are hard. And it's definitely a great and fun place.